Carolina, Congressman Greg Murphy, a member of the House Ways and Means Committee. Congressman, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Your committee actively writing the tax portion of this bill. What can you tell us in terms of getting those tax extensions into law and redoing them after the deadline this year?
I can't give you any specifics, or Chairman Smith would have me hind-quartered. But that said, we're working on each provision to say, hey, what is reasonable? What can we do? But at the bottom line, Maria, we have to worry about what our debt and what our deficits are doing. And so this is where we're trying to look through. President Trump has said no tax on tips, no tax on seniors, and some of the other things. How we can deliver those, it's going to be hard because, again, we have to make sure that this is financially reasonable, financially responsible at the end of the day.
Would you agree to a reconciliation package that does not include the tax extensions?
We talked about this one bill, two bill. I think the one bill, two bill argument should be over by now. I know some people, especially here in the House, are trying to keep that argument still alive. We need to get one thing done. I don't want us to have two different bills. I think this needs to be considered. Tax does need to be considered as one package in reconciliation.
By the way, I spoke with Marsha Blackburn the other day, and she said to me, I'm thinking it might be three bills. Okay. She said the first bill on border and defense, the second bill on everything else, and the third bill on the kitchen sink type stuff, meaning no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security. That's the first time I heard that. Three bills.
Yeah, well, you can't do Social Security in reconciliation per the Senate parliamentarian. Look, I want it to be over and done. We need to get moving with this. We don't need 50 different bills going through. Now, we can't control what goes on in the Senate. All we're trying to do on Ways and Means is to try to get reasonable tax relief policy that does not grow our debt.
Understood. Look, House Republicans want to cut Medicaid and Medicare fraud. Not the actual muscle of Medicaid and Medicare. You're calling for Medicare Advantage to be reformed, saying that it's been hijacked by insurance companies. Got a new report from MedPAC finding Medicare spent about 20% more for Medicare Advantage enrollees than it would have if those same people were enrolled in basic Medicare. A difference of about $84 billion, Congressman. And we understand that that's really where the fraud and abuse is in a big way, Medicare and Medicaid. So what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, so Medicare Advantage was started out with a good idea that they would go into homes, try to look at people, see their different situations, and make them healthy. But what often happens with government programs is that you have accountants, you have executives that want in and squeeze the nickel as hard as they can. So what you've had are companies, and I'll pick out the worst offender, is United, who is literally charging $1,000 more per enrollee than anybody else, who go in and they upcode. You take a stone cold healthy person and you all of a sudden have 15 diagnoses with them. They upcode, and so they charge the government more. That's where that 20% more for Medicare Advantage over fee-for-services come. And then on the backside, then they don't pay the people that they should, the doctors, the hospitals, such that many of them just don't want to take them in the network. Then they put out Joe Namath or JJ to say, hey, what a great policy is. It's a scam, and what's turned out to from a good policy has turned out to be a bad policy. And personally, I think there's a lot of bipartisan support now to going back and reforming this program. Again, started out with a good idea, but has then been torched by insurance companies to just drive profits.
Yeah, you would think so. And it's good that you're actually able to identify specifically where the fraud is and try to take it out.
Yeah, Maria, it can't be, it's not necessarily fraud because some of this is legal, but they're pushing the boundaries, and it's really immoral if that. Real fraud goes in with Medicare, people charging the system, for things that they didn't do, et cetera, et cetera. Some of that is happening in Medicare Advantage where they're making diagnoses that have no treatment. This is a target-rich environment for the government to come in and say, look, hey, you're doing things that are wrong, and there are a lot of savings that should be had.
Yeah. President Trump also ordering the shutdown of the Department of Education, giving that power back to the states. Congressman, you're calling out what you call the awful state of medical schools in America, warning that they're focused on woke issues and not merit. I'm so glad you're raising your hand about this. You're calling on the Association of American Medical Colleges to do more in protecting Jewish medical students as well, accusing the association of pushing climate justice and racial division. Good for you for putting a spotlight on this, Congressman.
Well, I've had it. Maria, I've devoted my entire life to the care of patients. I don't care what they look like, who they are, what they feel, gender they are, et cetera. Every patient should be taken care of. The rise in anti-Semitism that are seen especially here in D.C. at Georgetown universities and other woke policies from these medical schools comes from the top. The double AMC, the leadership there needs to go. The same thing with the LCGME, the accrediting body for medical schools. They've all turned woke, pushing DEI policies, and what we're doing is we're turning out physicians who care more about social justice than the patients in front of them. It's really going to destroy the future of medicine in the United States. I've seen this firsthand. So, there's a lot of problems here. Again, the whole DEI policy is the greatest, in my opinion, the greatest peer pressure event since the Spanish Inquisition. And now we have leadership that's embracing this because they fear being said they're called racist or misogynist or something. The leadership needs to be changed at these institutions so we can get medical schools back to taking care of each patient. We have some medical schools and residencies programs where I've seen, no, I'm not going to work with a white doctor. I'm not going to work with white patients, or I feel bad about seeing a patient with a MAGA hat. This is wrong. This is absolutely wrong. And this comes from the leadership. It comes from the top down. This needs to be reformed, and it needs to be reformed yesterday.
Well, the Trump administration is cracking down on anti-Semitic protests on college campuses while targeting foreign students who promote Hamas. And I spoke with Attorney General Pam Bondi about it yesterday. Here's what she said.
Yeah, we're going to pull it from every university. If you do not comply with the law, if you do not protect our students on campus, these kids go to college to be safe, to learn in a safe environment, and that's not happening. And it's absurd that these universities are not stepping in to protect them, yet they're protecting these protesters who are also, I believe, some domestic terrorists. They're here inciting riots, inciting violence against students on college campuses, and it's going to stop.
Yeah, I mean, ICE wants this foreign-born Cornell student who led pro-Hamas protests to turn himself in. We're expecting more demonstrations at Columbia University today, even though the university partially agreed to Trump's demands to crack down on campus anti-Semitism. Masks are banned on campus now. Police are getting more power to stop the out-of-control protests. And the White House already revoked $400 million in Columbia's federal funding over this. Congressman, why is it so hard for these universities to take a stand?
It's hard, Maria, because here we are. I'm a big free speech advocate. I want free speech. But then the left did not want free speech because they said, well, we don't want hate speech. But they're turning a blind eye to the Islamic terrorists that are here and promoting this in our country. It's unconscionable. I just don't understand it. Because, look, I'm so glad that the president is using a stick, which is really taking away money from these universities to say, look, we're not going to tolerate this. We can't treat our students differently. You have an obligation, and this is on undergraduate campuses and on graduate campuses, especially in medical schools, to protect their students and to make sure that they feel safe. If not, the leadership needs to change, and then the money needs to go away.
Congressman, we'll be watching your work. Great interview. We so appreciate your time this morning.
Say that again?
I said we're so appreciative of your time, and thank you so much for being here.
All right, take care. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Congressman Greg Murphy on Capitol Hill.